In 2009, Eddie Curry wasn't just dealing with pressure on the court. Off the court, something far darker was unfolding. His ex-girlfriend Nova Henry and their 10-month-old daughter Ava were found murdered in her South Loop townhouse in Chicago. The killer? Frederick Goings, a 36-year-old attorney who had once represented Nova in a paternity suit against Curry. After that case, the two got romantically involved, but the relationship quickly became toxic. Nova had tried to leave multiple times. In 2007, she filed an order of protection against Goings, only to cancel it less than 2 weeks later. That pattern of fear and confusion finally reached a boiling point on January 24, 2009. When police arrived, the scene was devastating. Nova had been shot while holding baby Ava. Both were dead. Even more horrifying, her 3-year-old son Noah was in the house too. Miraculously, he was unharmed. But he witnessed everything. He even told investigators that Frederick did it, using a chilling hand gesture to signal silence. Surveillance footage would later place Goings' vehicle near the scene multiple times before the killings. He fled to Michigan City, Indiana, where he was arrested at a hotel pool, smooth as ever. Police found gunshot residue in his car. In court, he denied everything. The jury didn't take long, just 4 hours to convict him. He received life in prison without parole. The judge called him a predator. Eddie Curry was awarded custody of Noah. Nova's family somehow found a way to forgive. Her mother became a prominent advocate against domestic violence. Her voice now fights for women who, like Nova, tried to escape but couldn't. Keon Clark had it all: length, hops, and a natural shot-blocking instinct. Drafted 13th overall in 1998, he averaged 8.2 points, 5.9 rebounds, and 1.6 blocks per game during his career with the Nuggets, Raptors, Kings, and Jazz. But behind the numbers was a secret he carried for years. He was never sober. Not once. Clark later admitted he drank daily, sometimes downing a full pint of gin before games. He'd sneak sips at halftime, black out regularly, and play through a fog. His addiction had roots in high school, and by the time he hit the NBA, it was already spiraling. After leaving the league, the situation worsened. In 2006, he was hit with drug and gun charges and didn't even show up to court. He was sentenced to 30 months in prison, though that was later overturned due to inadequate legal representation. But trouble found him again. In 2012, a loaded gun was discovered in his home during a probation check. In another incident, he crashed his car while drunk. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison in 2013 and served 4. Released in 2017, Clark returned to Danville, Illinois. Since then, he's been trying to heal, to give back. He's talked openly about the darkness, the addiction, and the regret. His story is raw. It's not about comeback seasons. It's about surviving rock bottom and figuring out how to live after the buzzer sounds. Rodney Rogers was a force, a 6th Man of the Year in 2000, a key contributor for multiple playoff teams, and a versatile forward who played for 7 franchises, including the Nuggets, Suns, and Sixers. He earned $27 million during his career, but in 2008, just a few years into retirement, everything changed. While riding an ATV in rural North Carolina, Rogers hit a ditch, flew over the handlebars, and landed on his head. He broke his 3rd cervical vertebra and bruised the 4th. The result: instant paralysis from the shoulders down. Doctors gave him just a 5% chance of ever regaining movement. From that moment, every day became a fight. Rogers required round-the-clock care, a ventilator, and a motorized wheelchair controlled with head movements. His medical bills soared to over $400,000 annually. Depression and suicidal thoughts followed. But he had one constant: his fiancée, Fa Suggs, who stayed through every moment. Her support became his anchor. Rogers didn't disappear. He started a foundation to help others with spinal injuries, gave public speeches, and became an advocate for accessibility and rehabilitation. In 2024, he filed a lawsuit against Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina for denying in-home nursing care deemed essential by doctors. Rodney Rogers may have lost his mobility, but he never lost his fight. His story is one of unimaginable loss and defiant resilience. In 2010, tragedy struck the Van Exel family, and it didn't come from a game or a scandal. Nicky Maxwell Van Exel, son of former NBA guard Nick Van Exel, shot and killed his best friend Bradley Bassie Ayo. The reason? Bassie was scheduled to testify in an armed robbery case they were both tied to. Nicky didn't want to take that chance. He lured Ayo to his home in Garland, Texas. Then, using a 12-gauge shotgun, he ended his friend's life. What followed was cold and calculated. He wrapped the body in plastic, tossed it in his SUV, and dumped it near Lake Ray Hubbard. He then returned home, cleaned up the scene, and ditched the weapon. He was charged with capital murder, later reduced to murder. His defense claimed the shooting was an accident during horseplay. The jury didn't buy it. In February 2013, Nicky Van Exel was sentenced to 60 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole after 30. During sentencing, Nick Van Exel, the father, testified. He apologized to the victim's family and said no one should ever face such pain. Bradley's mother, in tears, said she had treated Nicky like her own son. Now, all she had left was silence and betrayal. Once hailed as the next great center, Greg Oden was drafted first overall in 2007 ahead of Kevin Durant. But instead of dominating the league, his career became a painful reminder of how fragile potential can be. Chronic knee injuries limited him to just 105 games over 7 years, and when basketball faded, the struggles only deepened. On August 7, 2014, police responded to a domestic violence call at a home in Lawrence, Indiana. Inside, they found Oden's ex-girlfriend with facial injuries, swollen eye, cuts, and blood on nearby furniture. A witness told police Oden had punched her during an argument. The place was wrecked. Oden didn't try to deny it. He admitted to striking her and said he deeply regretted it. Initially charged with 2 misdemeanor counts of battery, the charges escalated. Days later, he was hit with felony battery causing serious bodily injury. He eventually took a plea deal. He pled guilty to the felony charge, and the other 3 were dropped. In February 2015, he was sentenced to nearly 1,000 days of probation, fined $200, and ordered to attend 26 weeks of domestic violence and alcohol counseling. A no-contact order with the victim was also enforced. Oden's fall wasn't just physical, it was personal, legal, and emotional. For a man once seen as a generational talent, the final chapter in the NBA came with silence and shame. Rodney Rogers' name already appeared in headlines for his tragic ATV accident, but in 2024, he was back in the news for a different kind of fight. Rogers filed a lawsuit against Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina. The reason? They denied in-home nursing care that doctors had already declared necessary. The lawsuit wasn't about money, it was about survival. Paralyzed from the shoulders down and living with limited mobility, Rogers depended on structured care to maintain basic quality of life. Denial of that care meant longer recovery periods, missed therapies, and heightened risks of infection and complications. In short, it made his already difficult life unbearable. The court case shined a spotlight not just on the healthcare system, but on how easily a former athlete, once a millionaire, can be left behind when the cameras stop rolling. For Rogers, who once soared above defenders, this was a different kind of battle. One not fought on hardwood, but in hospital rooms and legal chambers. His story continues as one of resilience. Through pain, through paralysis, and through a system that failed him more than once, he's still pushing forward. After Nicky Van Exel's conviction, the aftermath continued to ripple through families, friends, and former teammates. It wasn't just a crime, it was a betrayal of trust and loyalty. Nicky and Bradley Bassie had grown up together, played sports together, and leaned on each other through years of teenage turmoil. That's what made the murder so horrifying. Inside the courtroom, the trial became an emotional marathon. Both families broke down multiple times. Nick Van Exel, once a fiery point guard known for his fearlessness, looked broken. His public image never fully recovered. Though he tried to distance himself from his son's actions, the guilt clung to him in interviews and public statements for years afterward. Even after sentencing, Nicky never spoke publicly. He never apologized directly to the Bassi family. The silence only amplified the pain. Meanwhile, Bradley's mother, Eunice Aquao, became a local advocate for crime prevention in Garland. Her community programs focus on mentorship, conflict resolution, and gun safety. The wound left by that one night in 2010 never fully healed. For both families, it became a life split in two, before and after the betrayal. Clark's talks are raw and emotional. He recounts waking up in places he didn't remember going to, losing friends, and seeing family members break down. He also talks about what it means to rebuild, how even after prison, even after losing millions, there's a path forward if you're honest about your past. He now mentors young athletes and works with a local recovery program for men battling substance abuse. Though he never returned to the NBA, he found a new calling, making sure someone else doesn't follow his path. Clark's legacy might not be measured in dunks or blocks, but in lives steered away from the edge because he was willing to tell the ugly truth. Shawn Kemp, famously nicknamed the Rain Man, was among the most electrifying players of the 1990s. His high-flying dunks became the stuff of legend, and his influence on the game was unmistakable. However, once the spotlight dimmed, his life after basketball took a troubling turn. In 2005, Kemp was sitting in a parked car in Shoreline, Washington, when police noticed a strong marijuana odor. A search revealed 60 grams of marijuana, cocaine, and a semi-automatic pistol. He pleaded guilty to trying to possess more than 40 grams of marijuana. Then, in 2006, in Houston, he was pulled over again, this time for driving without a license plate. The smell of marijuana led to a second charge. It looked like Kemp's off-court issues were piling up, but things didn't stop there. In 2023, Kemp was involved in something far more serious. After tracking his stolen cell phone to a mall parking lot in Tacoma, Washington, a confrontation erupted, and shots were fired. Kemp claimed it was self-defense, saying someone else shot first, and he returned fire. No charges were filed initially, but a month later, he was formally charged with first-degree assault. The trial is scheduled for May 2025. Once a household name for highlight reels, Kemp now finds himself back in the spotlight, but this time in a courtroom. The final outcome remains uncertain, but the descent from NBA stardom to felony charges tells a story of a man who, after flying so high, may crash even harder. Anthony Grundy never made headlines during his playing days, but everything changed after retirement. In 2011, he was arrested in Wake County, North Carolina, for his fourth DWI. Instead of facing the consequences, he fled the country and disappeared to Ghana. Years passed. Then, in 2017, he tried to return to the U.S. through JFK Airport in New York. He was immediately arrested. The charges had stacked up: felony DWI, 5 counts of failure to appear in court, and 2 parole violations. He got 2 years in prison. But his story didn't end there. In June 2019, Grundy hit a 59-year-old woman with his car on Dixie Highway in Louisville, Kentucky. He didn't stop. The woman died. Grundy turned himself in 8 days later. He admitted he didn't have a license, his car wasn't insured, and the plates were expired. Just 5 months later, in November 2019, police found Grundy stabbed during a domestic dispute. He was lying on the street with multiple wounds and died at the hospital. He was just 40 years old. Grundy's story is not one of scandal, it's one of unraveling. A quiet career, a loud fall, and a tragic end. A reminder that the darkness doesn't always wait until after retirement. Sometimes it's there the whole time, just hidden behind the scoreboard. Leon Smith's path to the NBA was anything but easy. Raised in foster care after being removed from his home at age 5, Smith channeled his pain into basketball. He became a dominant force in high school and was drafted 29th overall in 1999, but he never played a single game for the Dallas Mavericks. Smith refused to play in the minors or overseas, demanding a spot on the main roster. The tension built and then exploded. In November 1999, he had a full mental breakdown. He threw a rock through a car window and swallowed 250 aspirin in a suicide attempt. He was hospitalized and later institutionalized. Within a year, he He was arrested twice for threatening an ex-girlfriend and damaging property. The Mavericks bought out his contract for $1.2 million, spread over 10 years. His NBA career was over before it began. He made a few attempts to return, short stints with the Hawks and Sonics, but never stuck. His mental health battles were never addressed properly, and the league had no infrastructure to support someone like him. He was a young man with raw talent but no safety net. Leon Smith's story is about more than basketball. It's about what happens when someone in pain is handed millions in expectations, but no guidance. The spotlight blinded him, and when it faded, there was no one left to help him see. Darius Miles was a teenage phenom. Drafted 3rd overall in 2000, he brought swagger, talent, and a bright smile to a league that was ready to make him a star. Over the course of his career, he earned more than $60 million. By 2016, he was bankrupt. His listed assets? $460,000. His debt? Over $1.5 million. Nearly $300,000 of that was owed to the IRS. Bad investments, poor financial advice, and legal troubles consumed his post-NBA life. One of the lowest moments came in 2011, when TSA found a loaded gun in his carry-on bag at an airport in St. Louis. He was arrested for unlawful use of a weapon. But the worst pain didn't come from courtrooms. It came from loss. In 2018, Miles opened up in a Players Tribune article about how depression nearly killed him after his mother's death. Basketball had ended, his money was gone, and his emotional anchor had vanished. But there's a light at the end of his story. Since 2019, Miles has co-hosted the Knuckleheads podcast with fellow former player Quentin Richardson. The show became a hit, raw, funny, emotional, and real. It gave Miles a new lane, a new voice, and a chance to share what he'd learned the hard way. Darius Miles didn't bounce back onto the court, but he bounced back into purpose. And for someone who once lost everything, that's a win. Luther Wright stood 7 feet 2 inches and was drafted 18th overall by the Utah Jazz in 1993. He was a defensive beast at Seton Hall and looked ready to anchor an NBA paint. He lasted just 15 games. In January 1994, Wright was found at a rest stop in Utah, smashing car windows and attacking garbage cans. Police brought him in, and he was soon diagnosed with bipolar disorder. The Jazz released him shortly after. What followed was years of hell. Wright fell into homelessness and addiction. He lived on the streets, often without food or shelter. At one point, he lost 2 toes to frostbite. From NBA arenas to sleeping on benches, his fall was unimaginable. Eventually, Wright found faith. He connected with a church in New Jersey and began piecing his life back together. He wrote a memoir, A Perfect Fit, detailing his collapse and the painful road back to stability. He now works with at-risk youth and speaks publicly about mental health in sports. Luther Wright didn't become an NBA star, but his survival matters. His voice helps others avoid the same fall. Melvin Turpin was supposed to be the next big thing. At Kentucky, he was an All-American, dominant in the paint. In 1984, he was drafted 6th overall by the Washington Bullets, then traded to Cleveland. A 7-footer with a soft touch, teams thought they had a future star. But his pro career never clicked. He averaged under 9 points per game across stints with the Cavs, Jazz, and Bullets. His battle with weight became a constant storyline. For every step forward, there were whispers about conditioning and discipline. By the early 90s, Turpin faded from the league entirely. After retirement, he lived quietly in Lexington, Kentucky. He worked as a security guard at the University of Kentucky Hospital. Former teammates described him as kind but withdrawn. He rarely spoke about his NBA days. There was no autobiography, no podcast, no big comeback story. On July 8, 2010, Turpin died by suicide in his home. He was 49. There was no public note, no dramatic unraveling in the news, just silence. It sent a jolt through Kentucky's basketball community. He had fame, money, opportunity, and yet, like so many others, it wasn't enough to keep the darkness away. His story reminds us that sometimes, the loudest pain is the one that no one hears. In the late 70s and early 80s, Walter Davis was a force. Nicknamed the Greyhound for his silky smooth game, Davis was a six-time All-Star and the face of the Phoenix Suns. A master of the mid-range jumper, he scored over 19,000 career points and helped define an era. But Davis was carrying something few knew, an addiction that would eventually upend everything. In 1985, after dropping 43 points in a game, he checked himself into rehab. He admitted publicly to struggling with cocaine and alcohol. At the time, such a confession was rare, and Davis was praised for his honesty. Unfortunately, rehab wasn't the end. In 1987, he relapsed. The relapse didn't just affect Davis, it triggered a domino effect. His testimony in a drug investigation led to the indictment of multiple Suns players. While he wasn't charged with a crime, the fallout was devastating. The Suns suspended him without pay for the final game of the season. He was labeled, not just a user, but a whistleblower. He kept playing, but his body started to betray him. Back problems piled on. After a brief stint with Denver and Portland, he retired in 1992. Post-retirement, Davis slowly rebuilt. He rejoined the Suns organization, doing TV work and scouting. In 2024, he was posthumously inducted into the Hall of Fame. The NBA celebrated his greatness, but it came after years of personal struggle. Behind the jumpers and accolades was a man fighting for control, sometimes losing, sometimes winning. Chris Gatling made an all-star team in 1997 and was known as one of the NBA's hardest workers. He hustled, rebounded, and carved out a 12-year career that included stops with Dallas, Golden State, Cleveland, and more. But after basketball, the hustle took a turn. In 2013, Gatling was caught illegally squatting in a $1 million home in Paradise Valley, Arizona. He didn't just live there, he also tried to rent it out, pretending he owned it. He was charged with theft and forgery and given 4 years probation. But the worst came in 2017. He was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for running a telemarketing scam that preyed on the elderly. He promised website packages that would generate passive income, except it was all fake. 12 victims, mostly seniors, were conned out of $155,000. Some gave up their savings. Gatling spent it on himself, clothes, food, entertainment. This wasn't some brief mistake. It was cold, calculated fraud, and it painted a brutal picture of how far a former all-star had fallen. The league gave him a platform. He used it. And then, after the lights went off, he used people. His story is a reminder that even the grittiest players can lose their moral compass when the structure of pro sports disappears. Terry Furlow was 25 years old and finally breaking out. He'd averaged 16 points and 4 assists during the 1979-80 season with the Utah Jazz. A scoring guard with a motor, he seemed ready to make the leap. But on May 23, 1980, his rise ended in tragedy. Driving a 1979 Mercedes-Benz at over 120 miles per hour near Lindale, Ohio, Furlow lost control and crashed into a utility pole. He died instantly. The autopsy revealed cocaine and Valium in his system. Open beer cans were found in the car, along with marijuana. It wasn't just an accident. It was the result of a deepening problem that few saw coming. Magic Johnson, one of Furlow's closest friends, served as a pallbearer at his funeral. The loss hit the league hard, but back then, drug use was still whispered about, not tackled. Furlow's death was one of the first high-profile signs that the NBA had a serious problem on its hands. It's easy to remember the highlights, harder to confront the truth. Furlow had the talent, but he never got the chance to show the world just how far it could have gone. Jameson Curry's story started with promise that bordered on fantasy. He was the all-time leading scorer in North Carolina high school history, more points than Michael Jordan. Ranked among the top recruits in the country, he was set to play at UNC. Then came the drug bust. In 2004, Curry was arrested in a marijuana sting. His scholarship was pulled. He landed at Oklahoma State, played well, and was drafted by the Bulls in 2007. But he never played a game for them. Instead, Curry became more well-known for what happened off the court than on. Over the years, he racked up 13 arrests, everything from drug possession to public urination to resisting arrest. He played one NBA game in 2010 for the Clippers. It lasted 3.9 seconds, the shortest career in league history. By 2017, he was out of basketball and working as a truck driver. After a car accident left him with broken ribs and a fractured back, any hope of a comeback was gone. He now works as a youth coach, trying to give back and share his cautionary tale. But his legacy isn't about points or records anymore. It's about missed chances and how quickly dreams can burn out when discipline and direction disappear. Leon Smith was just 19 when his NBA career effectively ended. He'd been drafted straight out of high school by the Spurs in 1999 and traded to the Mavericks. A big man with promise, raised in foster care, Smith came into the league with trauma most couldn't imagine, and no one was prepared to help him handle it. Within months, it all collapsed. He refused minor league assignments. He demanded a roster spot. Then in November, things went completely off the rails. Smith smashed a car window with a rock, swallowed over 200 aspirin pills, and ended up in a psychiatric facility. He told officers he was an angel sent by God and that he wanted to eat the devil. 2 more arrests followed in the next 24 hours. The Mavericks cut him loose. The NBA had no mental health program in place, no plan. Smith was just gone. He tried to make comebacks in the CBA, overseas, even briefly with the Hawks and Sonics, but nothing stuck. The league moved on. His pain didn't. Smith's story isn't about failure. It's about a kid who never had a chance. The NBA saw talent, not trauma, and by the time they realized what he really needed, it was already too late. Darius Miles was supposed to be a star. Drafted 3rd overall in 2000, he was the face of the young, flashy Clippers and a favorite in every Slam magazine issue. He made over $60 million during his career. By 2016, he was broke. He filed for bankruptcy with less than $500,000 in assets and over $1.5 million in debt. He owed hundreds of thousands to the IRS, and the story didn't stop at money. In 2011, Miles was arrested at an airport with a loaded gun in his carry-on. That added to a list of legal and financial troubles that followed him after retirement. But behind the headlines was something deeper. In 2018, Miles wrote a piece for the Players Tribune. In it, he talked about depression, about losing his mom, about how once basketball was gone, he had no idea who he was. He eventually found a new lane, starting the Knuckleheads podcast with Quentin Richardson. It gave him a new voice, a way to stay connected, a purpose. Darius's story isn't just about money, it's about identity. How athletes raised in the spotlight often have nothing waiting when the lights turn off. It's worth ending with Turpin again, not just because of how it ended, but because of how quietly it ended. The NBA has spent billions marketing its stars, but so many of its players disappear once their knees give out or the jump shot fades. There's no exit ramp, no real safety net. Turpin went from NCAA hero to forgotten man, from Sports Illustrated covers to hospital shifts. His suicide didn't get a documentary. It barely made national news. But it represents the thousands of players who step off the hardwood and into a world that doesn't know what to do with them. These aren't just tragedies, they're warnings. These stories aren't about box scores or buzzer beaters. They're about the parts of basketball that networks never show. About players who didn't just lose games, but lost control, lost hope, or lost themselves. Some found a way back, others never did. The NBA is brighter now, more supportive, more aware, but these names deserve to be remembered, not just for what they did on the court, but for what they survived, or didn't, off it. If you want more stories the NBA would rather forget, ones that go beyond the highlight reel and show the real cost of the game, you're in the right place. Subscribe, stick around, and let's tell the stories no one else will.